Hey guys, welcome to Practical EMS. Today I'm going to continue the kind of new format that I'm trying for a couple weeks here where I kind of go over some of the lessons I've learned working in emergency medicine, and I hope they provide some value for you and you get something out of them. This is the second emergency standard that I've developed from working in emergency medicine, and this one's called getting off on time. It starts back when I had this awesome partner when I was a new EMT. We'll call him David. He was a great paramedic. Even though he was newly graduated and still figuring things out for himself, he cared about his patients, especially the psychiatric emergencies we dealt with. He had a great bedside manner with these patients. I remember watching him with those who were emotional or suicidal and at the end of their mental rope. He knew how to connect with people, like really connect with them. He made them feel heard, understood, and not so alone. And that was true with his partners on the ambulance and his friends as well. Everyone thought they were David's best friend because he was that good at forming meaningful connections with people. But David had run some really tough calls, the kind that make the news due to their level of tragedy and drama. Some were calls from years before when he was an EMT, and I'd heard all the stories. They were horrifying, the stuff of absolute nightmares. On the surface, you'd never know how it affected him. He seemed to handle it all in stride, joking, laughing himself, and making others laugh at the same time. But he was unable to leave work at work. Getting off on time was not a high priority for him. He would be the first to volunteer for extra shifts, the first to stay late for another call. And he was so social that his reports would often be left until the end of a shift, getting him off hours late. I remember clearly one of my calls with David when we were working night shift. One of those dark, cold Colorado nights, we'd pulled up to a patient sitting in her car contemplating suicide. We'd been called by the police department to assess her and do what we could to help. I stood off to one side of the vehicle with the cops. I distinctly remember him kneeling down on the driver's side of the vehicle, speaking calmly but confidently to a young woman who was at the end of her rope. Her tears didn't deter David. He explained that none of us on scene knew or understood what she was going through, nor did he pretend to understand. He was able to break down her mental defenses, so she agreed to go with us to the local ER for an emergent evaluation and see what resources could be provided before she made a huge mistake. She willingly came with us and hopefully got the help she desperately needed. This is just one of countless calls we ran together where he helped change someone's life for the better. But David was a drinker outside of work. Many of us in EMS are. But he allowed it to become excessive and then all-consuming. A mechanism for temporary relief of stress became an unconquerable vice, and that vice eventually took his life. He was a guy who most would never suspect wasn't handling the stress the right way or with the right coping strategies. His attitude was always great, but rather than prioritizing leaving work on time and laying those burdens down as he left, he continued to carry them as many of us do. Those burdens, those terribly tragic calls will demand something from us. And if you're not intentional about letting them go or developing methods of healing with intention, I think a bit of separation from your patients is healthy. Yes, you may not be able to connect with them on that intimate, personal level every time, but that distance allows you to move on and not carry something from every patient that isn't yours to carry. It is not your emergency. I'll say that again because it's a tenet we need to live by. It is not your emergency. Most of us got into this field to connect with other human beings. We want to be there in a meaningful, sympathetic way in their time of need. This separation that also allows room for connection is a fine balance that we have to strike. That meaningful interaction will actually help us avoid burnout and improve our job satisfaction when we connect with a patient, but we must be able to detach as well because that allows us to be resilient in the face of tragedy. It's a balance I still try to find each shift. Getting off on time is not about clocking out on time, but also finding the work-life balance that will help you survive long term. In emergency medicine, we don't have the luxury afforded by many other careers. Not that others don't get off late, but for us, getting off late, in addition to the significant cognitive load during our shift, will eventually lead to burnout. Getting off on time is an obviously easy to say thing, but it's much harder to actually execute on. There are always things beyond your control, but my recommendation is to control the controllable factors first to maximize the chances of not only getting off on time, but also leaving work at work. Some practical things I do as a provider is double check your labs and imaging in real time. Don't go through all of them at the end of your shift. In addition to possibly having to call back a patient if you find something you missed earlier, you'll get off late if you save your double check to the end. Finish and sign your notes as you go. Charting needs to serve its purpose: medical legal protection, an accurate description of what occurred, and most importantly, it needs to be done. Start thinking about how you're going to leave the ED at least 2 hours before you plan to go. As a provider, this comes into play a lot because we have patients that need to be followed by our partners, patients still in the middle of their workups that we're not going to be able to stay for. Which ones can you get started but leave for the next provider to fully evaluate and work up? Different departments will call for different strategies to accomplish this, but the point is, look for those small points of friction that cause you to leave later than you need to and control them. Whether you're an EMT, paramedic, ER nurse, or clinician, it's your responsibility to make sure the right systems are in place to ensure you leave when you're supposed to. The reality is your employer probably doesn't want to pay overtime, so they're incentivized to help you with this. Fight for more ambulances to cover the area you're working in for better shift crossover. Fight for nurses to come in on time every day so they can get handoff on your patients. Fight for providers to have several hours of crossover in their shifts so you can stop seeing new patients 1 or 2 hours before you need to leave. Fight for that locus of control, because getting off late will take that control away from you and place it in external circumstances. The systems we work in will never be perfect. There will always be days when you get off late because someone or something else you can't control, but the key is never allowing it to happen because of you. Another key aspect of getting off on time is mentally leaving your day behind as well. You must be able to gently set down the burdens you may have started to carry throughout the day and leave them outside your home. Leave them outside your role as husband, father, wife, or mother. In emergency medicine, because of the tragedy, the horrific circumstances, and the critical role we play in these scenarios, we can have a tendency to take on these burdens that are not ours to carry. We must get competent at laying these down. This is a skill that can be developed with consistent practice. We see the very worst things human beings can do to each other. And because of our experience with this evil, we can develop a worldview that becomes jaded and cynical. We work our asses off to save the victim of a driving accident, but they die anyway. We clean up the blood-soaked sheets, put the trauma room back together, and then immediately get tasked with caring for the belligerent drunk driver, someone with only a few minor scrapes who caused the death of another human being. We witness the lack of justice, fairness, and morality every day, and this can cause major changes in us personally. It can burden us with a mental weight we aren't meant to carry. It can make us take work home and fail to leave it behind at the door. I don't know if you believe in God or not. Maybe emergency medicine has made it impossible for you to believe. Maybe it's made it so you do believe. But God or not, higher power or not, you must find something beyond yourself to take that burden from you. We will never be able to solve the moral problems, the unfairness, or the lack of justice in the ER. So lay down that uncomfortable sensation, that fear, that anger, that cynicism, so you don't carry it home to your family. Leave it at the hospital door. Leave work on time. Regardless of your career or job, you must separate work time from family and home time. This becomes even more critical if you've transitioned to work from home arrangements in recent years. That line can be difficult to draw when your workflow is interrupted by family obligations and household demands. I can't speak to every specific dynamic, but some creativity and intentionality can go a long way towards creating that separation. I recognize there are times in life when you may have to stay late at work and grind. You may have to bring work home with you. You may have to clean up the messes your kids are making while simultaneously answering work emails, and that grinding, bringing home the bacon, may have to be number one priority during certain seasons of life. But recognize that when this happens, you're choosing to prioritize work over family. The first goal is always to provide a roof over your family's heads and food on the table. Then the luxury of time spent with them can come once the necessities are covered. Perfect balance is not always achievable. The pendulum of life swings back and forth, making it easier at some times than others to prioritize family and clearly separate work from play. If you need to make money for your family, don't feel guilty about working longer and harder. And if you're in a blessed situation where you can spend more time with your children, don't feel guilty about that either. Just be cautious about letting the season of work prioritization stretch into years of imbalance. That period of hard work might be beneficial to your family in the long term, but only if the grind doesn't turn into a lifelong commitment to hustle at the expense of connection. Another big reason you need to get off work on time is because your identity is not your work. You may have worked your ass off to get where you are. You may have earned an expensive and hard-won degree that took years of your life. You may have spent decades climbing the ladder at your company. That's something to be proud of, and it may represent a big part of your life, but it doesn't define you. You could get fired tomorrow, and you would still have the ability to find work again. Maybe in a different field, maybe at a different company, but you could find a way. It's your resilience, your work ethic, and your motivation that form the core of your identity, not the job title or credentials next to your name. When you over-identify with your job and see it as the defining part of who you are, you start to justify making compromises in the rest of your life. Staying late becomes just part of the job, but those small compromises, those bits of time stolen from home life, add up over time. One justification people use for staying late is that their employer will be impressed or at least grateful for their effort, and this may be true to a degree, but they don't care in equal proportion to the sacrifice you're making. They won't appreciate it enough to make it worth it. Your coworkers might appreciate the extra effort today, but they'll forget it tomorrow. The extra work you finish today, it'll still be there again tomorrow. But I can guarantee there are a few people who will remember how often you stayed late, more than your boss ever will. Your spouse, your kids, your family will remember. Leave work on time so you can leave work at work. For me, mentally leaving the patients and the stress of the hospital at the hospital is key to actually making the transition. If I've had a tough day, I often let my thoughts churn on the drive home. I replay the difficult cases, the angry patients, the frustrating specialists. I let my mind process and feel whatever I need to feel. But when I turn onto my street, all that has to stop. Those last few turns towards home must allow me to shift into husband mode, father mode, home mode. If I'm not really off the clock, I'm not really off the clock if I can't make that transition. I get that this can be harder if you're self-employed or an entrepreneur. Maybe you're always thinking about work. Maybe you work from home and there's no physical transition at all. Maybe you toggle between work mode and parent mode several times a day. In these cases, you have to be creative to create a transition point. Maybe that means having a dedicated workspace in the house. Maybe it means having a specific block of time where the rest of the family knows this is work time. Define that boundary when and where so that you can also define when work ends. The burdens we carry as humans aren't limited to in emergency medicine. You can bring those weights home from almost any job or career. Burdens are anything you take on unnecessarily that can also take something from you. They steal your limited mental bandwidth. They take away your subconscious. Maybe it's the snarky comment from a coworker. Maybe it's the promotion someone else got that you should have gotten. Maybe someone closed a sale you felt belonged to you. These are all burdens we hoist up and carry. But if you walk through the door with them and try to hold them up while also playing with your kids or having a conversation with your spouse, you'll drop them or you'll strain yourself. Worse, you'll hurt someone else. That burden might cause you to speak too harshly to your child or your spouse when under normal circumstances you would have responded with grace. Carrying the stress of the day into your living room puts a weight on your shoulders that makes everything else harder, so you must consciously take it off. Lay it down, leave it at work to truly get off on time. Emergency standard number 3, and this is a big one. Take care of yourself before you take care of others. Until the last couple of years, I always struggled with proper work-life balance. I never had made myself the number one priority. A big part of this was constantly putting school and work at the top of the list every single day. I would wake up late, arrive at work barely on time to clock in, and start my day constantly behind. The thought of waking up early to do anything productive before work was the furthest thing from my mind. I was constantly worrying about the classes I was taking, how to make my application be the best for PA school, and generally just worrying about the future. I would eat whatever was convenient, and sure, I dieted here and there, occasionally having success, but I never became disciplined enough to adhere long-term to any one plan. On the ambulance, my partner and I were constantly drinking sugary energy drinks to keep ourselves alert for the next call. When I did sleep at night, it wasn't usually long enough or high-quality sleep enough because I was typically binging food and TV right before bed. All my blood was focused on was digesting a large amount of food rather than on getting quality sleep. My mind was still reeling from whatever TV show I had been consuming. I know this because I would promptly fall asleep in between calls while waiting to get dispatched. I lacked mental clarity and my brain felt foggy more often than not. I would have some periods of time where I was highly motivated and I would go straight to the gym after a 12-hour shift on the ambulance and get a workout in, sometimes every day for a few weeks before the motivation would fizzle out and I'd give up. And even when I was going strong, it was always after work. It was still never the number one priority of the day, so after a hard shift, it was the first thing I would cut out. Because I had so many things that I prioritized above my own physical and mental health, I did my patients a disservice by not giving my best paramedic self most days. I often lacked self-control and discipline in many areas of my life because of this lack of focus on myself. I remember working the night shift with one of my long-term EMT partners, and she really wanted a donut, just one donut. So I drove us through a Dunkin' Donuts drive-thru saying, we should really just buy 2 donuts, one each. Well, she talked me into getting a dozen, and we threw the box on the dashboard. She ate about half a donut while I proceeded to eat 11 and a half donuts over the next couple of calls. The rest of that night was a blur as my blood sugar rose and then crashed. Talk about a lack of self-discipline. I'm sure I was not a great paramedic after eating those donuts. I couldn't have been. There's no way I was thinking clearly after eating that much sugar. I never put my physical and mental health as a priority in those days, so my mental and physical health rarely made it on the priority list at all. We in the ER are on the front lines of the hospital. A critical patient who needs immediate attention could arrive at any point, and we must be ready. We don't have 100% control over our day. I don't get to decide when a patient needs me right away and which ones can wait, although there are some variables I can control. Many patients are very stable and simply waiting for results to come back, but sometimes a patient gets rushed in from the triage area and I need to drop whatever I'm doing to attend to them. Frequently, an ambulance crew brings in a patient who may be critical and I need to get up and head to that room to receive handoff report and assess the patient right away to determine how sick they are. Point being, I don't get to decide what my day looks like to any significant degree most of the time. Despite the emergent nature of working in EMS or in the ED, you must still make yourself the number one priority in the day before you start caring for others. This can go against the grain of how we think we need to operate while on shift, and certainly many patients do require your immediate attention, and that's okay. But the majority of the time, you have the ability to drink a little water, eat a little food before you go see your next patient. You can't forget to hydrate and eat throughout your shift and expect to feel okay at the end of the day. Personally, I've had times where I allowed myself to go an entire shift with hardly drinking, hardly eating, and that inevitably led to binge eating at the end of the day, stuffing my face right before bed, falling into an endless cycle of feeling like shit, not caring for myself the way I should. So if you must use the bathroom, go use the bathroom, then see your next patient. If you have a text message from your kid that needs to be answered, answer the text and then go see the next patient. At the end of the day, most of the patients we see are not actively dying. Some certainly need your immediate attention, but this is not every patient, and not even necessarily every shift. Take that second for your own well-being before moving on to the next task. Jordan Peterson says you should treat yourself like someone you are responsible for helping. We in healthcare are great at helping others. What if we use that same experience and focused on things we know we need to do every day to help ourselves? I would add here it's important to also take care of your coworkers, oftentimes before taking care of a patient. Make sure that the staff you work with feel heard, understood, and if they're frustrated with a patient, hear them out and find out why before you go and see said frustrating patient. Make sure those around you have clarity surrounding the workflow of the day. Despite the dozens of factors that are completely out of my control during the day, there are certain aspects I can control that will help me take care of myself. I can control how early I get up in the morning and what my morning routine looks like before I go into the emergency department. I can control how well I hydrate. It's a really big misconception that you need to go an entire shift without drinking water just because it's busy. There's nothing wrong with having multiple water bottles or whatever you need to remind yourself readily at hand on your desk to properly hydrate throughout the day. Especially towards the end of your shift, you need to properly hydrate in order to think as clearly as you can possibly when you're fatigued, tired, and mentally exhausted. We need to increase our odds of success, and hydration is a key way to do that. In addition, nutrition is absolutely key to feeling your best and taking the best care of your patients. You can't be eating a ton of sugary foods, sodas, processed unhealthy carbohydrates during your shift and expect to feel awesome when you get off, or even feel good while you're working. You owe it to yourself and your patients to be eating the proper nutrition throughout your day. Also, you can control what time you wake up in the morning. You can control whether you get a workout in before your shift. If you are not first putting yourself as the number one priority in the morning with hydration, nutrition, exercise, you will not be nearly as effective at managing your patients and dealing with the relentless emergent situations that come throughout the day. You must stack the odds in your favor by making yourself the first priority in your day. This can be a difficult concept for your family to accept as well. Your spouse has demands on your attention, your kids have demands on your attention, you have family events and social obligations to attend to, and all of that is fine, but on your day off. On a day when you have a shift, you must take time for yourself in this line of work, or this line of work will beat you down. It will make you fat, depressed, and feeling like shit, and before you know it, burned out. Personally, I take much better care of my patients when I'm not hungry, not thirsty, and when I'm mentally well. When I'm thinking about all the other things I need to do in my life, my family, my health, I will not be present with my patients, and I won't take care of them to the best of my ability. So I do the things I need to do for myself before I go into work. We all know how it feels when we aren't taking good care of ourselves emotionally and physically and how this affects our performance at work. At the end of the day, we are after longevity in emergency medicine. How do we sustain this and make it something we can actually continue doing long term as an advanced practice provider, EMT, nurse, paramedic, or physician? By making ourselves a priority above our patients, this is not a selfish way to think. It will enhance your ability to care for patients and be there for your teammates. It will help you think with more clarity and focus on a given task. It makes you a better provider. It's all about making healthy habits easily accessible. Have water within arm's reach during your entire shift. Pack your food in the morning and make it easily accessible throughout the day. If you're someone who comes in and eats hospital food from the cafeteria, that's a variable you can't control. I highly encourage meal prepping. It all allows you to have food readily available and ensures you're planning for proper nutrition, not just grabbing whatever sounds good when you're stressed, short on time, and more likely to give in to the dopamine hit of a highly processed, carbohydrate-filled meal. If you don't plan for proper nutrition, you won't have it. You can't eat the crap from the cafeteria that you know you shouldn't eat and justify it because of the stress you're under and the lack of time during your day. My grandfather and grandmother were hardworking as hell. Growing up, I remember they were always in motion. My grandparents would watch me and my siblings periodically, and I distinctly remember my grandmother always moving around in the kitchen, cooking and baking deliciously unhealthy foods with a cigarette hanging from her mouth. My grandpa was always doing something around the house, working out in the yard, hanging Christmas lights, cleaning, mowing, chopping wood. He was focused on working hard all the time. Even after he retired, he worked as a school bus driver for grade schoolers every day. He still got up in the early hours of the morning and drove kids to school. He worked like this every day of his life to provide. But he didn't make himself and his health a priority. He prioritized work for much of his life, and this was out of necessity. He had no family money, no inheritance, nothing handed to him, so taking his foot off the gas wasn't an option. He had to work to make money and provide. Many of us have been there, but getting stuck in this cycle means you're never able to get your head far enough above water to truly care for yourself before your family, before your work. You're too worried about the next paycheck, how your family's going to eat, and whether there will be a roof over their heads. Unfortunately for my grandpa, this led to a stroke. Later in life, when his health finally caught up to him, my grandpa was outside chopping wood one day when he had a massive, irreversible stroke. He was out on their property with no one else around. Somehow he was able to walk himself back to the house and sit in his recliner, but his brain was already irreversibly damaged by that time. He was never the same. He was a shadow of his former self. He would have brief moments of clarity, but he required full-time care from my already disabled grandma for the rest of his life. Of course, some health conditions can't be prevented. But I can't help but wonder if my grandpa had taken time to assess some basic labs, his blood pressure, his fitness, his eating habits, could he have delayed that stroke by another 10 years or even prevented it completely? That extra time he could have bought by paying attention to his health might have been vital. He could have had more coherent time with his family. Instead, he went from highly functional and mobile to severely disabled overnight. Kicking the can down the road of life and delaying the personal care that is required before you take care of the next patient, the next shift, the next career move, or your family's next crisis will eventually catch up to you. That is why I call these standards emergent. That is exactly what they become if you ignore them long enough. If you engage with them before they become emergent, they can be your best friend, but delay them long enough and they are an emergent health crisis slapping you in the face. That's why I often get up early. That's why I run and lift every day. I want to push off that emergent health crisis as long as I can. Not everything is preventable, but we are playing with probability here, trying to move those odds ever so slightly in our favor. No plan will guarantee a perfectly healthy and problem-free life, but you can tip the scales by meeting high standards as often as you can. The emergent standard of taking care of yourself first is crystallized in emergency medicine, but the truth is you must take care of yourself first, regardless of what you do for a living or what your day looks like. You will perform better, think better, and feel better if you take care of yourself before you ever set foot in your place of business or begin tackling your day. The ambulance and the emergency department are not the only places where you need to be thinking clearly and calmly. If you own a business, think about the difference walking into work hydrated, energized, and confident would make. If you have a presentation at work, how your boss is going to react to someone disheveled, overweight, and sweaty versus the person who got up at 6 a.m., worked out, hydrated, ate a high-protein breakfast, and reviewed their notes before walking in. Your health, mental and physical, will trickle down into everything else in your life. And raising its priority starts by moving yourself up your own priority list. Being there for your family is another reason why you must put yourself first. You won't have the energy to get on the ground and play with your hyperactive 3-year-old if you don't exercise regularly. If your kids are like mine, they hit the ground running in the morning and want your attention immediately. If I want to make myself a priority and get the things done I know I need to get done in life, I have to get up before they do, and by a decent stretch of time. That's why getting up early is such a key to success, because if you wait until the rest of the world is getting up, including your family, you will have the same mediocre results as everyone else. You must be better to get better results. How can you wake up earlier? It starts with getting a good sleep routine. Stop eating several hours before you lie down at night so your food is no longer digesting while you're trying to rest. Finish hydrating several hours before bed as well so you aren't up 5 times to use the bathroom. Stop scrolling your phone an hour before bed so the blue light doesn't affect your brain. Don't work in bed. Read or do something to get your mind off the problems of the day and the problems you're already anticipating for tomorrow. Set an alarm and get up the first time it goes off. Snoozing has been proven to give you only poor quality sleep and does nothing to benefit your day. I find that cold plunging right before bed is helpful. The concentration it requires helps reset your brain. Lowering your body temperature right before bed also helps relax and helps you fall asleep more easily. To those who are stay-at-home parents, I understand how difficult this can be. Your children have demands on your time from the moment they wake up until after they're supposed to have been falling asleep. With no clear delineation between when you are and are not on call for your kids, it can be very difficult to find the time to put yourself first. So believe me when I say I know this is not an easy task, but I still believe it's worthwhile to pursue as often as you can. Get up before your kids, drink your coffee, read something enjoyable, and avoid the temptation to scroll on your phone. Get the workout in and start hydrating. The chaos of toddler life will be much easier to manage if you've given yourself some proper attention before you're consumed by the attention demanded by your kids. Guys, that was the third emergency standard I wanted to talk about. I hope you got some value from that. I really think that this is one of the big ones, that taking care of yourself before you take care of others is a very core tenet, especially in emergency medicine. You've got to put yourself first in the morning. You've got to do things for yourself to be there physically and mentally for your patients and for your family. So give me your feedback, guys. Let me know if I'm way off base on this, if you didn't get any value, but I appreciate your time and listening, and we'll see you next time.